Hey everybody, welcome back to the first edition of PD and P-Dubs Unscripted in 2025. That means I should put it as a new season on when I upload it.
I think so. I think we've just gone into a new season. This is great.
So I think this would be season 3 of the podcast.
Wow. It's almost like this is really good. It's really tallying up. It's like a Netflix series, podcast series.
No, just wait till we get to the Simpsons category of like 37 seasons. We got another 30 years.
We got a long way to go.
Maybe we could shoot for, Seinfeld. They were 9 seasons.
All right, that's a good goal. 9. Yeah.
Get to the Seinfeld
I can see
level.
that better than 30 right now.
Well, you got to shoot big sometimes. Got to go big or go home.
That's right. But happy 2025 to everybody, and hope you had a blessed Christmas and wonderful start to your new year. And here we are. It's beginning of a new year. A lot of people talk about goals and connections and how they're going to move out into the new year.
Which is, we talked a little bit, I think last week maybe, about how it's hard to believe this is a quarter century into the 2000s.
Oh, I know. That's something.
Quarter century.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel that long ago. Everybody was worried about 2000 and Y2K.
Yeah, I remember you brought that up. Like, I made a career off of that when that was going on. Was just into accounting software consulting then. And like, I couldn't believe, how busy we were, and companies would pay whatever to make sure that their financial data got converted.
Right. And here we are where we're even more digitalized with everything.
Uh-huh.
Because I bet back then, I don't think in 2000 you had all the online banking like you have now, where you could deposit a check from your cell phone.
Not in the manner it is now. I mean, I would say we were probably in generation 1 or 2 back then. But
now you look at how far the world's. Well, even think 25 years ago, there was no smartphones. You had a BlackBerry, which pales in comparison to what you could do on a smartphone these days.
Yeah, we used to have we had cell phones that were flip phones as consultants, but we also had a 3-party like walkie-talkie feature to it.
Oh, was that like the Nextel?
Yeah,
that's what I had in college.
Mm-hmm. And it was free to talk over the Nextel, but if you talked by the phone, it was you're burning minutes.
Right.
So it was always just trying to talk with partners like teammates through the Nextel at different locations. And the whole timing of the when to squeeze the trigger and when to let go, and it was rough.
Yeah, because I know that's what I did early on in college. Like call home was use the Nextel. Like,
did you really?
The walkie-talkies.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, it's not going to use minutes. Don't have to use my dorm phone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the other thing with the Nextel is like a walkie-talkie. It was like if you put your phone on speaker. So like I'd be on a train and I'd be Nexteling with a teammate of mine, and it's like interruptive to people,
Right. And even that, like, it's hard too, because it's not like how we're conversing now, where we're here, where it's like you could only talk when you're hitting the button, so you couldn't like interject if somebody was saying something.
I know you had to wait till they were done. So,
and Nextel doesn't even exist anymore.
I know it's that's a long time gone. In 25 years, like. I remember our boss at the time saying, there will be a time shortly coming where you'll have a device and it'll be like a computer in your hand and a phone at the same time. And he was talking about smartphones.
Right.
And, lo and behold, here we are.
I would say our smartphones are more powerful than the original computer that took up a whole room.
I would say, yeah.
It's in the palm of your hand. Well, even like think about an Apple Watch or a smartwatch.
Yes.
What you can do on those things.
Mm-hmm. I know. I'm still learning about what I can do on my Apple Watch, but I got a long time to figure that out. So,
well, by the end of this, when we get to the end of season 9, you'll know how to use.
I'll know how to use it, man.
But all this is thinking about like smartphones and talking about the Nextel. Think about the community, how it's supposed to, in a sense, bring community.
Yeah.
But, a lot of things have recently pointed to how, like, community isn't what it used to be in the world around us today.
Exactly. Yeah. Now when we talk about communities, it does include, like, online or remote or off, not face-to-face connections to people.
Right.
From, individual text messages to family group chats to FaceTime to, you name it. It's all different ways to connect with people. And unlike on social media, you have various groups that people come around and they post things.
Right. You have those communities, whether it's on through like Nextdoor or through like a Ring, if you have a Ring doorbell, which primarily just says that there's a coyote in the area.
Yeah, boy, the traffic, the coyote traffic is ramping up these days on those kinds of things because it's the mating season.
Right. Did you see the video from an Aldi's in the Humboldt Park area?
No.
I'll have to show you afterwards, but they were in like kind of like the deli kind of area at the store, like one of those old, and they pulled a coyote out of there.
I saw the beginning of that, and I saw him fishing in, but then I moved on, and I didn't see the end.
It was a coyote.
They pulled a coyote out of the freezer section?
Yes.
Out of the frozen meat section?
Yeah.
What?
It was a coyote. I'll show it to you when we're done.
Oh, I have so many questions.
I was wondering how it got in there.
Yeah.
And
was it alive?
Yeah.
It was alive.
Yes.
Oh, so somebody must have thought it was a dog. Like, look, here's a dog. I'll bring my dog in.
Right. So let's see here. Maybe we'll pull it up and have a live reaction of you watching it online here. And I don't know, if I'm allowed to show it in the video part of the podcast.
Yeah, I don't know.
But so we can get his live reaction of this coyote being pulled out here. So there we go in the Aldi store.
Yeah, that's the only part that I kind of saw.
Yeah.
And I just kind of, I don't know what they're doing. So I zipped past.
Yeah, I saw it and somebody's like, I thought they're going to pull a possum or a raccoon out.
Yeah.
And it is a full-on coyote. There's the...
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Now it's off to the race. Oh, he's going back in. He knows where to get food.
But
wow.
How did he get in there?
That's a great question.
But yeah, so long and short, we got done this coyote thing.
That's a smart coyote.
It was. He's not the wily coyote.
No,
there.
He's not. No.
But can you imagine if you're grabbing something down there and you see this coyote looking back at you?
He must have somehow, how people go through the doors that open.
Right.
He must have figured it out and I'm sneaking in and
how does nobody notice?
No.
But so that's why I feel you see a lot on Ring and Nextdoor is coyotes.
Yeah.
I was like,
so people create a sense of community on those things and what was that loud boom? What did you see the coyote? I'm
over this part. Did anybody hear that sound?
Right.
Or what's going on at this intersection?
Yes. Why are there police at this intersection? Why is there a helicopter hanging overhead? A lot of these questions that people just want to know.
Right.
And it's I think that's a little indictment on technology. It's kind of rather than investigate ourselves to find answers, we just throw it out to somebody and say, give me an answer.
Well, that's I forgot what I was listening to. They're talking about how the internet and Google kind of ended in a sense arguments with people because you'd be like, oh, well, what team won the Super Bowl in 1992?
Yes, yeah.
And people are like, oh, it's this team. No, it's this team. All you need to do is just Google it on your smartphone.
Yep.
And the argument's over.
Right.
You can't argue anymore.
I know. Yeah.
So it's kind of ruined that. But that sense of community is something, it's slowly shifting away. I was at kind of a tri-circuit meeting back in October, and they were talking about this community because we were talking about even in church, you see the rise of online worship and that, yes, it's a community, but it's not the same as in-person community when it comes to worship.
Right.
And we were talking about that, and Pastor Chris Whitby, who's in our district office, was talking about how one of the biggest things that affected our community and being a part of a community is central air and garages. Because he said he remembered growing up, I think he said in the Peoria area that, when it was hot in the summer, all the neighbors would gather on so-and-so's front porch.
On the front porch.
Because they had a huge front porch. And he's like, they were drinking stuff. I thought it was lemonade, but I found out later on it wasn't. While the kids played in front. But he's like, now here in this day and age, everybody pretty much, a lot of people have attached garages. So you can pull right into your garage, shut the garage door, and not even be seen by your neighbors.
Right.
And then air conditioning. Well, why do I need to go outside to get cooler when I can have the house set to whatever temperature
I want?
I feel comfortable. So now we're more insulated where we just kind of stick into our homes.
Yeah, and along those lines of front porch to back porch, over time, people gather more in their back porch and they invest more in like a back deck, a place to entertain their guests.
Right, because thinking of your house, it's more your backyard. I know you have a little bit of a front porch, but I would assume more in the back.
Yeah, we're more in the back.
But at least you have the park behind you.
The park kind of lends itself to kind of seeing people, engaging with people, especially with our dogs, and people walk out with dogs. So we've had moments like that where we've met people over the fence line, like by the fence. So
like Mr. Wilson from Home Improvement.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, it's just not a real high fence, so they can only see my eyes and my nose. But yeah, it has shifted over time, as you said. Chris brought out. I remember those kind of days when I was growing up. Like, the neighbors a couple doors down would come over and talk to my parents by the front porch. They'd either say, hey, here's a chair for you. Can we get you something to drink? And sometimes they would sit and chit chat while we as the kids would be running around. But yeah, it was always a presence out in front that people could see your neighbor.
Right. I don't know, like maybe it's because where I live, like maybe there's not, I know there's kids, but I'm like, I remember growing up where we'd be playing baseball in the cul-de-sac I grew up in until maybe we couldn't see the tennis ball flying by our heads anymore.
Yep.
Or even playing basketball on the front driveway. And like, I don't see, I don't live in a cul-de-sac anymore, but I'm like, I don't see kids playing catch in the front yard.
Nope.
Don't see really anybody with basketball hoops on the drive or on the house.
Yep.
Where like, we were out there, or even like this time of the year when it was be a little bit warmer or getting cold in the fall, we'd play two-hand touch football in the cul-de-sac.
Yep.
But I'm like, I don't see too often.
Yeah, you don't see groups of kids. I'm same way in our neighborhood. I don't really see like pickup games of any kind of thing: basketball, baseball, football, even in the park behind us. So that's an interesting movement because kids occupy their time inside the house now with games and things like that. So it has shifted where people find community. And, we were talking even with regard to, church being a community, which it certainly is. As we were kind of kicking that around, I remember the whole concept of Starbucks that came out. I think the original founder was George Schultz or something like that. And he developed the concept of a third place, where, it's a place where people go to find enjoyment and community outside of the first place being their home, second place being their work. There's a third place. Right. And so that whole concept, third place could be church, third place.
Like a bowling league.
Yep.
Or a different community. Like, our softball team is a sense of community.
Yeah.
But you talk about Starbucks, but they're changing. Did you see the new policy that's going to be enacted?
No.
You can not just sit there and not get anything or use the bathroom. You have to buy something if you want
to buy product.
Now they're going to start making that a policy of the stores.
Yeah, so that concept, I heard Schultz talk about that. I was invited to where he was a speaker, and that was probably 12, 15 years ago. Well, not 15, but close. And it was really kind of cool because you could kind of visually understand it. And as what the term community meant in society, it was kind of shifting toward like, I'm just going to go to another place. A bar is a community.
Well, that's what it is. You're talking. My mind went right to Cheers.
Yeah.
Where like everybody knew everybody's name. In the song, like Norm walks in, hey, Norm.
Yeah.
So like they had a community there where they would kind of lean upon each other and get advice and talk to each other. And yeah, some were silly conversations, but they had some deeper conversations because they knew each other. They had that sense of community. Right.
It was a stop along the way. You had different people that, you engaged with there that might not be part of your home life or your church life.
Or even
your work life.
Well, it's a different intersection of life of who you're intersecting with because, Norm was, I think, a business guy.
Yeah.
Cliff was
the postman.
Yeah. And then you got Sam and Fraser.
Well, and that what I was kind of getting to, like sometimes people in one place or community might not be in your other place. So when I began to date Gwen and get to know her, I would always talk about my friends because her and I worked together. I was her boss. And so I would start sharing about my personal life. but I would never share who my friends' names were. I'm like, oh yeah, this or that, my friends, I'm going out with my friends. And then, so it's kind of a Jerry Seinfeld thing. Don't want my worlds to collide. So like I had like my personal home life, my friends, my work, and I kept them apart as like separate communities until one day she goes, do your friends have names? So I'm like, well, yeah, but does it matter? And so I was like, oh, she's trying to cross-pollinate communities here.
That can't be allowed.
No, I know. And so it was just kind of an interesting thing. And I see that sometimes. Invariably, there could be communities that do cross-pollinate, and that's fine and great.
Even like I think of like in a church setting, like I think of growing up at my home church, we were always 8 o'clock people. And then you had like the 10:15, 10:30.
Yeah.
Honestly, I couldn't tell you who came to the 10:30 service.
There you go.
Because we only went to the 8 o'clock and then Sunday school, and then mom and dad would pick us up, and it's like, wait, I don't know who these people are.
Yeah.
It's like two different churches, even though it's the same church, but you have the same community. I mean, we've heard people at Emmanuel talk about that
too.
Where it's like, I don't see it because maybe a change of schedule or a rhythm of life, where it's like, I'm not going to the same service. I don't get to see my normal people I normally would see.
Right. And people yearn for community for sure, because even as you brought up the Emmanuel structure, I mean, we've had people who said, Pastor, we used to have time where, the coffee, the fellowship hour, and that is a big part of our culture here, people checking in with one another. And, if it meant just passing by and seeing them and saying, hello, how you doing? Just briefly going from one service to another, or spending a little more time over coffee and goodies in Fellowship Hall, you could sense that the people really want to have some kind of community connection.
Right.
And I think, so while things have shifted, I think it's still built within us that God made mankind to have community, and he started right away with Adam and Eve making a family.
Right, because he says even it's not good for man to be alone. That's what he says right away after creating Adam.
Right, so you have a relational aspect between a man and a woman, and then that next level is family, and you live life with your family, and there is built-in community support, encouragement, and so forth. And then the layers keep kind of building out. And, that's where, like in Jesus' time, hospitality was a big thing because they had a sense of community. If a visitor came from out of town, people did whatever they needed to do to make their stay feel welcomed and cared for, because if they didn't, it was kind of a shame on them for not caring and being hospitable, but also an indictment on the community itself.
And I think of like Martha, because she was trying to get everything ready for Jesus, and getting mad that Mary was just sitting there doing nothing in her mind.
Right. Well, we see that in our family gatherings, don't we, a little bit? Like, how come I'm doing this and that, and my sibling is not doing anything? And so parents got to deal with that a little bit.
But yeah, so we have that like community, that fellowship is an important thing for people.
Right.
But it's kind of been something that has been lost in recent, because I mean, we talked about this, I think, a lot when we were doing Gathering Place during like COVID times, of like that community, because we were so isolated.
Yeah. And that was a good thing for that time. It seemed to work well, and it connected people who were kind of forced to be out of normal community patterns. And so we found things out with regard to that. Like there is an online community, kind of like what we're doing right now, podcasts. Right. People find community just by listening to us and learning about us, perhaps, that, maybe one day they might make the next step, if they're not already fully connected to us, make the next step to come and see who we are.
Because it's almost like that person because of listening. Like, the one podcast I listen to, that's what they kind of talk. They're like, we just want this to be like, you're sitting in a room with your friends talking sports.
Yeah.
And it kind of feels like that because I've been listening to podcasts for like 9 years now.
Okay.
So I'm familiar with them, and like, okay, like I know their interests when it comes to these things, and you kind of get to know them just as our listeners here, whether it's through this or even preaching, because we do share about our life in our sermons from time to time.
And that's what I liked about the Gathering Place, because it allowed people in the moment to maybe type in a question or a comment. I really enjoyed that aspect of it, because I think that started to create a sense of community Whereas this is kind of one way, and people are listening, and that's fine. There's just all sorts of ways to communicate amongst in a community. But overall, as we had pointed out, that there's been a seismic shift in community, and maybe COVID had a lot to do with it, but I think it was already happening before then.
Yeah, because I know like when, I can't remember if it was President Buss or Pastor Whitby at that just tri-circuit thing, and then Glenn, one of our members, emailed us an article talking about this book, Bowling Alone, which I read when I was at Fuller, and like this book I think came out in the early 2000s. So obviously, it came out in 2000, Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam, and it just says, it's this whole idea about, it says here, once we bowled in leagues, usually after work, but no longer. This seemingly small phenomenon symbolizes a significant social change that Robert Putnam has identified in this brilliant volume, Bowling Alone, which The Economist hailed as a pedagogous achievement. I'm not saying that word right. Drawing on vast new data that reveals America's changing behavior, Putnam shows that how we have become increasingly disconnected from one another, and how social structures, whether they be the PTA, church, or political parties, have disintegrated. Until this publication of the groundbreaking work, no one has so deftly diagnosed the harm that these broken bonds have wreaked on our physical and civic health, nor had anyone exalted the fundamental power of these bonds in creating a society that is happy, well-educated, healthy, and safe. And one of the things I was trying to look through before we started recording about what I highlighted says on page 61 here, broadly speaking, as John Robinson, director of the Time Diary Project, has shown, our time allocation have not changed dramatically over this period. We have all averaged just about exactly 8 hours of sleep a night throughout those decades, for example, but there are some important exceptions. Watching TV consumes more time now than it used to, while we spend less time now on housework or childcare. And so when I was reading that quote earlier today, I was like, that idea where we do spend more time inside watching TV. 20 years ago, somebody said, "Oh, I'm going to go binge watch a show on Netflix," or even just binge watch TV. People would be like, "What's that?" Yeah. But you can have people that will binge watch an entire season of a show in a day or two. Right. And so we get our time, and that is an insulated thing where you're by yourself, maybe with a significant other or something. But for the most part, you're not out involved in a community. Right.
And I think that is really part of the whole shift. There is so much available to us to occupy us individually that it does seem to satisfy an individual's need for a connection to something, but it is not as deep as what true person-to-person relational community achieves. And we were kind of talking about that with Greg Finke about joining Jesus on his mission. I think he posed the one chapter, The River Has Moved, relative to the prominence of the church being a core part of people's community lives, probably 40, 50 years ago. Well, the church has moved. Well, the church didn't move. The river moved. That's what the phrase is, not the church has moved. Right. The river moved. So it's like the church built their place and community would come, but the river that drew people to the church has moved and the church stays there. Now they're not as so connected, and they're not like a priority for people to think, oh, this is where I'm going to connect with community because I've got all these other opportunities. And when I have the availability, then I might connect back to church.
And even that, I was looking up as you're talking about that, but the whole idea of community watching TV and how I said it's it isolate. But I was looking, I didn't know what the official term was, but I don't know if you've seen this, but I know it's becoming a more thing now and things are offering more. But it says to watch a TV show with someone in another town, you can use a streaming service that offers a watch party feature. Like Hulu Watch Party or Netflix Party.
Oh, I've heard of these.
Which allows you to synchronize playback and chat with each other while watching the same show simultaneously, regardless of your location. So, to me, that's kind of showing the sense of community, but I'm not willing to make enough of a community and be with that person that there can be at their home, I'm going to be at my home. We're going to watch it at the same time and chat about it. But being in a completely separate building.
See, there you have it.
Where it's it shows you're craving community. And you think about that, whether it's a sport event or a big TV show, how many people like on a Sunday, like I think of like maybe The Sopranos when that show ended. What was everybody doing probably the next day at work? Talking about that. It. Or like a big sport, like day after the Super Bowl. People are talking about the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But now it's like you don't maybe have that because maybe with working from home more, you don't have that talking about things.
Yeah. And I think it's generational too. I think of like our 50s plus group. They're probably more 80s plus. And they crave community. They meet weekly. They spend 3 hours together.
And then you just talk about that fellowship. They have food. They that hospitality where there's a couple that makes the meal for everybody.
Right.
They have that hospitality, and and I think now in the past year or so they've wanted to wear name tags so that everybody can know everybody, make them feel welcome and hospitable.
Right. So as an older generation, they seek it and they find it in this meeting that is weekly, 9 out of 12 months. But I've also noticed, like, and probably going against, like, counter to what I just said. But in my own life, I know that when I was younger, in my 20s, and like, you have friends from high school, college, and you have a friend group. And then people start meeting people and they get married and then lives start in different ways. And so the connection to that group getting together becomes less. You could still be deep friends and like pick up and where you leave off. I mean, this describes my friend group from high school and college. It's like it never stops, but we always get down to, hey, we got to get together soon. Right. And we don't. And so my one friend, a couple of my friends, we connect on a fantasy football league. Okay, well, I'm only connecting with them if I'm playing with them. But that's a connection. Or we should go golfing sometime. Well, maybe if you got together once a year. Right. So it's almost as if people age and their lives take off career-wise. That dictates a direction for them. Maybe they have family and they invest their time in their family, and the other friends are as well. The getting together is less frequent.
And if everybody be spread out, where do you meet? Central.
So it gets more challenging, is what I'm saying. Perhaps as we get older in our lives.
But even like the other thing, like Angie and I were talking about, like Christmas cards.
Yeah.
Like it feels like. And I mean, it's probably part of me because I don't really send Christmas cards out, but like it feels like people are getting less and less sending Christmas cards out or sending the letter like, here's what's going on with
our family. Yeah.
And especially with social media and like something like Facebook, where everybody can stay connected throughout the year and see what's going on with somebody's life.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So it's almost like, do I need to send this letter out with my Christmas card? Because the people that I'm most likely to send to might be friends with me on Facebook. So they'll see what's already going on. And as it's happening.
Yeah.
And not like, oh, this event took place in March. I'm telling you about in December.
Yeah. When
somebody can see it right in March.
Right. Because that was a main way to catch people up, with friends and relatives. Certainly social media has jumped in and made it more frequent. Like, I can see like my cousins in California. I can see what they're doing in their lives. Way more now than when I was growing up, when we'd get the letter.
Right.
So you make a great point there.
So it's an interesting shift. And like, but I think that's where we see some struggles that people have is that they're missing that community. Like we talked about during COVID, like it's a struggle because I think God creates us to be a part of a community. And when we isolate ourselves, it makes us more prone to the attacks of the devil, but it can really mess with our psyche because we're not having that person to maybe share our life with or share the struggles with, and we're trying to handle it all on our own, which just leaves us exhausted emotionally.
Yes, right. And that's where the power of connecting with people in person is vital to us. And so, not to say that technology is the hand of the devil. Some might say that, but it can be used properly and helpful, but also can be used detrimentally.
Right, because I mean, I look as a pro, like, we're both in the same boat where a lot of our classmates from seminary got placed as pastors throughout our country. Because of social media, I can see what's going on in their life, in their ministry.
Yeah.
and know what's going on when it would be hard to go see. Like, I mean, Scotty, who was on our podcast, he's in Ukraine. I ain't going to get out to Ukraine anytime soon, and he's not coming back to the States anytime soon, but at least I can see what he's doing there and how he's ministering to the people in Kiev, the Kiev area where he's at near.
Yeah, and then relative to church, like worshiping online, worshiping in person, that became a big shift in COVID, as we know. And boy, did we see the necessity for community really jump in terms of people joining our online services during COVID, especially the shutdown phase. But it's still there. But yet there's a flip side. There are some people who are just physically unable to come to church or get a ride or whatever, and they really crave that online connection. They're greatly thankful for it. And then you have those who are like, oh, I think I'll just tune church in, and I'm doing breakfast, and I'll do this or that. I'm doing some tasks, and I might pick up some things along the way. Or they might even genuinely be worshiping from front to back, online. And that's all wonderful, but, the last two, the choosing to be online rather than in person, you're not getting the personal connections of the fellowship before, during, or after, that kind of thing.
And like you think about like the first services we kind of had back, I think that Memorial Day weekend when we had that drive, like that community of people, like I'm so happy to just see one another because we haven't been able to see. So
that was remarkable.
Right. So once again, that shows the importance of that in-person community because it is a difference. Like, yes, you can worship online and that's great.
Yep.
But there's something when you can actually see somebody. I mean, I maybe this speaks to when, like, we started, like, going back to the greeting of one another at the 10:30.
Yeah.
And we had a member say, why don't we do that at all the services?
Yeah, yeah.
And our people really seem to enjoy that here at Emmanuel, where sometimes it's like, oh, the musicians are like, come on.
Yeah.
Whether it's 5, 8, or 10:30, they're just like... because I think when we did it before COVID, we're like, okay, we're just going to give people a minute.
Yes, yeah, we were timing it.
It's got to be a minute, and then we go. But it goes over because people are just happy to see one another.
They are.
And it shows that community and that longing of face-to-face interactions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Even if it's just a wave across a pew. I mean, there's an in-person connection. Like you begin to connect a name to a face. You get to see their family if they have, or who is their community, like their direct community, maybe of people who worship with them and their family or whatever. So there's a lot to be said for it, and even the connection kind of things. I think of like concerts. I love watching on TV sometimes, or even on YouTube, concerts of the artists I really enjoy. Mm-hmm. And I get into it. I really enjoy. There are times where I could just sit and watch, but nothing beats being there in the concert. Like we went to Dave Matthews, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, I could watch Dave all the time, but being there was like, wow, this is really cool.
Well, like I think it was like going to a sporting event. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, it's great watching football on TV because everything's close. Yeah, especially here if it's like wintertime. I can watch it from my house in the warmth. But I don't know. There's something about like being there when like your team does something good, getting the high five from a complete stranger, whether it's a home run at a baseball game, a big touchdown, like high fiving everybody in the aisle. Or, you think about like a Bears game, going through that tunnel, and whether we play the Packers or not, there might be chance bashing the Packers. And there's something fun about that. Or like a Bulls or Hawks game with the chant directed towards Detroit. Like... There's something about that you don't get that on TV. And
I don't know, maybe it's just me, but like years ago when I was younger, my brother was a big Packer fan, and he would have people over. He'd barbecue. He'd come over and watch the Packer game. And so, he had a TV in the garage, and there'd be a big host of people watching the Packer game. And boy, if it was a Bear-Packer game, then it was huge, right? Mm. And so a lot of community that he was cultivating. But even now, like I know there's families that get together, and watch the game together. And I really enjoy that. Like when I have like family members around. But I have to admit, like, maybe it's just now that I'm a pastor and you get done with, a morning of church, you just like, I don't want to have another place to go. I just want to enjoy in my own place. So you kind of got this downtime while you're connecting to your team. But there are times where it's like, I feel like, and like, again, I might just be speaking of my own situation, where like those collective groups that not necessarily at the game, but would gather at people's homes.
Because you still have that same like high-fiving.
Yeah.
I mean,
it doesn't seem like that's happening as much. I'm sure there's a lot of people who do
and
that.
it could be, and like part of me is like, I just don't want people to see me getting angry watching. I mean, when I think the collective sports teams I cheer for had like a 300 winning percentage this past year.
Yeah, I know. It's rough.
I don't think it'd be people seeing the anger and frustration of like, what are we doing here, guys?
Yeah.
But there is that sense of community, whether, like I said, a concert, like, all the concerts I've been to, there is something about that community, like just feeling that energy from the band, from the fans around you. It's like, okay, this is awesome. This is why I go, even though, I could listen to the same album, same song on a CD or streaming, whatever you want to do it now. But there's something about seeing it live, whether it's like just the human interaction, like if they change it up a little bit, even if they mess up a little bit, it's like, this is what makes it special and unique because it's here in this moment and being part of this community.
Yeah. You think of our softball team, like it's an extra thing.
Don't be talking negatively about ours.
I wasn't.
Okay, just making sure.
I was going to lift it up as a community thing.
Okay, I thought you were going to talk about our record. Because
no, not at all. I don't care about our record.
I hear the coach is on the hot seat.
Oh.
The manager's on the hot seat.
Whatever.
Winning percentage is not very... It's like Elia or
Lee Elia.
Yeah.
No, I was getting at like, you and I could think of like, oh, we got to come back at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. I got to come back to Palatine, and you could easily say, I'm out, right? Like, it's downtime for me now.
I'm done with church. I just want to kind of chill.
But we have a wonderful team that really enjoys being together, enjoying in that hour. If we play a doubleheader, it's 2 hours.
Or even going out to a meal afterwards. Yeah, like even though I might be like, I don't feel like going back out. Once I get there and start playing.
It's fun.
It's fun. And maybe it's just because I enjoy playing sports and playing softball. But it's like, okay, and I like the people around us. And
we get to know each other a little bit more. We get to know our peeps.
Right.
We have fans who come.
Right.
So there again is like, sometimes we got to push through the need of I just like self-isolation or I just want to be alone to like enjoy company. I know that's something that I sometimes have to deal with. Like, I got invited. I don't know if I want to go.
Right.
I don't know how many times I've said that over the course of our marriage with Gwen and I. And she goes, every time you say that, you have an unbelievably great time. And it's true. Right. It's just like you got to fight past that.
You got to work up like the stamina, so to speak. And maybe it depends too, like introvert, extrovert. Like, I think that's with me being more on the introvert side of things. Like, it could be emotion, like just draining being by a group of people. And it's like, I just need that time to recharge. But it's like, once I get there,
I'm good.
I usually enjoy it, but it's just like the mental,
Yes, the mental.
And I think like
logistics.
I've talked with Andy, where like, waking up at like 6 a.m. is much better than waking up at 5:59. Just because it says 6 and not 5. So it's kind of like this like mindset of like, once you get past it, it makes it easier. But it's like, it's just 1 minute if it's 5:59 or 6 a.m. But let me tell you, it feels much better saying, okay, I got up at 6 a.m. than 5:59.
Yeah, that's how I am in my head on Saturday mornings because I go to the 6 o'clock men's group and laying in bed and the alarm goes off at 5. I'm like, I got to go back to church. I just feel like I left there.
Right.
And then so you push yourself to go because the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Right. And so, but invariably, anytime I get there, because I don't make it every time, but when I get there, it's like, I'm glad I came. And, there's fulfillment, there's connection. And I guess, if we could just try and summarize all this, I think what we're coming away with is the need for community still exists and is alive like it ever was. But it is shifting away from perhaps what is the good thing. Back to Mary and Martha, that story where Martha was mad that Mary just sat at Jesus' feet and she implored Jesus to say, would you tell Mary to get up and help me? Right. And he said, well, Martha, your sister has sought after the good thing. And so maybe as we look out into the new year, maybe all of us can ask ourselves, what is the good thing where we can connect into a good community that builds us up and connects us to people to enrich our lives. And if that's with a small group of people studying a particular book of the Bible, or coming to church every now and again, or like whatever,
like an activity like that, you're like the softball. That's no, we don't really talk Jesus or any faith things there. We just get together because we enjoy playing softball.
Yeah, and we get to know the members of our church family in a different way,
right?
And that's a good thing.
That's what, like with mission trips, why I enjoy those. Like you get to know people differently on a mission trip because you're living in that close quarters for that extended period of time. So you get to have more conversations and get to know that person. And it really makes a difference when you get to know somebody. It builds up that trust where you're like, I know I can lean upon this person. And that's partly what the church is here for, to lean upon one another and be encouraged by one another and to carry one another's burdens for each other.
Absolutely, because now what you're describing, you're going into much deeper levels that have stronger roots to them, that tie people together, not just for that particular moment, but perhaps developing friendships that last a lifetime.
Right. Like I think of the first mission trip I went on with my first congregation. While we were there in the middle of the week, one of our team members, who was older, her daughter was on the trip, but she lost her stepbrother in the middle of the week because of a sudden car crash back home. And it was like, she's like, do I go back home? Do I stay? What do I do?
Yeah.
But she ended up staying for the remainder. But you saw how that built a community of that team where we rallied around her and support her. And like we had a family that was on that trip, a husband and wife, and they were new to the church in like Christmas time, but they became like a huge staple and like that bonded that team and like, closer than maybe another teams because of just like that experience of being there for one another where it was a close-knit community.
Yeah. And who could ever script that, what you just described, thinking, well, I think I'll join this group or I'll serve with that group. But all of a sudden, bang, there it is. And people are connecting in a wonderfully human way that is also a very wonderfully spiritual and strengthening way.
Right. So thank you everybody for listening, and God's blessings.